Hi, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Almost Hour. Crank this little tune down a bit, a little bit more so it won't be too annoying. Okay, welcome back. Hadn't planned on doing one today, but then got to thinking about the monumental presentation I gave in the last 3 episodes, kind of describing the pattern of my life. And as an example of what I call a Messiah life. And I thought it would be good to follow that up with revisiting a more general idea, more general coverage of the concept. I'm going to call this one Evolving a Merkaba through Messiah Incarnations. So it's going to tie together what I've told you before about the Merkaba with what I hope you're starting to see of the patterns that form what I call a Messiah life. Okay, so let's jump right into it. I think to begin with, we kind of need to start with maybe a history of the idea of the Merkaba, which goes back to basically the most fundamental mysticism of all religions. In Eastern religions, sort of the field of the Merkaba being the field of the individual, the spiritual field, if you will. In Eastern traditions, it was envisioned as this system of chakras. 7 chakras, which represented various points along the spine, which corresponded to what the Eastern religions viewed as the major centers of human consciousness, if you will, human spirituality. And the idea that there was a crown chakra, the highest one, which represented consciousness beyond the body, which sort of would be something you could turn on if all of the other buttons were lit well, was kind of the idea behind that. The Western idea started out, one vein of it started out with sort of the occult idea of consciousness. It was a representation of the human figure as a pentagram. And the pentagram in spirituality represents that other view. It's more of a physical, active view of spirituality, based on the idea that, the brain kind of coordinates everything, but it's the hands and the feet and perhaps this center of the pentagram, which we don't talk about, the naughty parts, driving humanity to do what it does and be what it is. Now, so we've got systems of 5 and 7. And other mystics went on to, let's go here first maybe, the Judaic idea of mysticism introduced the idea of the Merkaba as double tetrahedron. The Star of David viewed on its side as a 2-dimensional figure. So that would be, a 6 points viewed in 2 dimensions, or 8 points viewed in 3 dimensions. Later thinkers like Da Vinci wanted to sort of extend these and try to find some better idea than the tradition he was raised in, this pentagram tradition, or maybe even the Jewish tradition of the Star of David, and came up with his idea of, okay, what if we start with this pentagram, but then if we allow the hands and feet to move, we could get maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points in this. and thus get sort of beyond the 8-point system, the 7-point system, the 5-point system to one of 9. My idea, or my truth, is that actually it's a 12-point system. I think you could most easily envision it as starting with this Jewish occult idea of double tetrahedrons and add another tetrahedron. And the way I explain it is that you're looking at a 12-dimensional system, which you can sort of reduce to make it more understandable to one tetrahedron, 4 points that correspond to physical incarnation, 3 dimensions of space, and the dimension of time. The second one corresponding to a spiritual set of dimensions, which have sort of their own spatiality, which is independent of this physical spatiality, but maybe can interact with it. And then the third pentagram, the last 4 dimensions, are a God level of perception, of existence, of incarnation, which, like the other 2, has its own existence that can impact the other 2. Okay? Now, how does that relate to spiritual advancement? How does it relate to the soul? Well, this is where we need to bring in the ideas of reincarnation and karma. Okay? If you have only one incarnation in the physical realm, it gives you basically one primary perspective for a Merkaba to be built in. One primary frequency, one fundamental you that you can identify with, and you have to make your judgments, your perception of the world based around that one view. If you have many physical incarnations, that view can become more robust, and this Merkaba starts to have a very complex rotational signature, a complex, maybe vibrational signature, growing and shrinking, kind of like a beating heart of that physical existence, the sum of all your physical experiences. Okay? And when that Merkaba becomes very, very well defined through having many, many experiences, it becomes basically more individualized, more of a representation of the real you that has emerged from the prototypical you that you were when you started out as a zero-level consciousness without any experience, operating only on the program that was given to you through the vehicle of your incarnation. So if you were born as a zero-level soul, embodying a universe, or a galaxy, or a star, or a hydrogen atom, you would have chances to get experience within that more or less limited realm of experience. As a human, kind of a middle soul vehicle that has a wide range of possibilities of experience, that might be a better soul vehicle for developing certain aspects of a physical Merkaba that you might not learn much about as a elementary particle or a star. You may not learn much about emotion. You may not learn much about ethics, morality, things that are core to learning how to be a functional human being. In the spiritual realm, you might envision that some souls that spend their time in the spiritual realm would be very good at creating virtual realities. Realities not based upon the limitations of the physical universe. Fantasy worlds, if you will, science fiction worlds, heavens, hells, realms that other souls might find themselves gaining experience in and learning lessons based upon the illusions that spiritual beings like to create. Just like physical human beings, we like to create fantasies, virtual realities. We're getting better and better at it, aren't we? So the spirit world has been doing that since the very beginning, because with pure thought, everything is a virtual reality. Until you've tested it in physical incarnation, you don't know if it's going to work or not. You don't know if it's going to hold together, if it's a good idea or a bad idea. And a spiritual existence is one learning what works and doesn't work from a spiritual standpoint. Now, how do we do that? Well, it depends on what your focus is. And as a soul that has been offered to play in the spiritual world, has decided to stay in the spiritual world rather than incarnate again. Now, why would you do that? Or why would you want to incarnate again? Well, incarnation in the physical realms teaches you a lot about the limitations, what works and doesn't work in the multiverse, in the physical multiverse, and teaches you a lot about what has proven to be useful in sustainable creation. In the spiritual realm, you learn about what is useful and attractive in the fantasy realm, where art can be anything, reality can be anything. Fantasy works, you're freed from laws and restrictions, perhaps, but the spiritual world has its own structure. It's not like the spiritual world that existed before the beginning of the universe, before the beginning of the multiverse. It has its own laws, and those laws depend upon the level of the spiritual being. And this is why, at one point, a five-pointed system was thought to be the way to describe a Merkaba. That, okay, you had the 4 physical dimensions and 1 spiritual dimension, which was thought to be centered in the brain. And this was kind of a very materialist view of spirituality, which persisted in the West. That's why the West's occult system, started with this sort of pentagram idea. The East's idea was based upon a very meditational view of, okay, I'm going to focus on what's going on in my brain, the third eye, the center of the brain that sort of helps the two halves communicate and come to an agreement on what's going on, and ties together what's coming from the rest of the body into something that I can then relate to getting out of the body, beyond the limitations of the body, to a spiritual realm of 7 dimensions, effectively. And that sort of got to the idea that there might be the lowest 4 chakras were sort of considered, or are considered, the ones that are very physical in nature, the lower desires of the human being, and The upper three represent sort of the higher desires, the ability to express yourself verbally and communicate, the ability to see beyond the two eyes, and the ability to maybe advance beyond physical reality to some higher reality, maybe a nirvana kind of thing where you could do anything you want, you could be anything you want, or you could be nothing. And that's kind of where most of the Eastern religions focus. Da Vinci, playing with the ideas, got to the idea that, maybe there's something beyond that, and maybe there's 9 levels. He got to the point where, okay, this is an 8-level system, this Jewish occult. This is a 7-level system, what I'm hearing from, the folks that come out of the Far East. Let's go beyond that to a 9. What would the 9th be? And that starts the idea of having, okay, you've got physical existence, spiritual existence, but there must be something beyond that. That is what the gods play with. These numbers are at the root of all spirituality. If you look at the key numbers in the Bible, for instance, you'll see that a lot of things talk about 7 as being kind of a good thing. 7 days of creation. Oh, it's all finished. This is good. We don't want to go beyond 7. Beyond 7 is this 8. That is built out of the 6. That was okay too, the Star of David. And then you go to 8, and whoa, suddenly everything gets confusing and goes crazy, and we start having a lot of conflicts when we get to the 8. Well, let's go to the 9, Da Vinci says. Now we have a higher level. We can reach for the gods, maybe through technology. And we become gods by inventing our own technology. And if you know anything about the life of Da Vinci and the focus of that time, those thinkers were the ones that started the idea of, well, humanity can become gods through technology. And then we won't need God anymore. Early postmodernism was encompassed by this idea. What I'm telling you, though, is that the reality is that it's a 12-dimensional system. And what we've been doing with this Gaia experiment has been trying to flesh out the details of a 12-level system of spiritual advancement through reincarnation and karma. And through allowing souls to form their unique Merkaba in these 12 dimensions. Now, not all souls ever deal with all 12 dimensions. Some souls don't like the degrees of freedom that come with the spiritual realm, or especially don't like what comes with the God realm, because if you kind of think of it as juggling these 3 tetrahedrons at the same time, all moving at different frequencies and in different directions and frequencies, it's a pretty complex task. There's a lot of room for error. You have to be pretty confident in your natural abilities to let some of these things run on autopilot without sending you crashing in flames like Icarus, flying too high to the sun. So this is what the whole system is built around. Each soul gets a chance to reincarnate in different soul vehicles. Now that species like humanity exist, and as I tell you, humanity is on the verge of becoming a God-level species. What's a God-level species? That's a species that actually naturally gets to the point of a spiritual awareness. all of the souls in that species are naturally going to get to the spiritual awareness point, a fifth dimension, which is something you hear a lot in the New Age community, the age of Aquarius, the fifth dimension. This is the bigger truth of our species. However, God-level species don't just get to that fifth dimension. They can get to the higher dimensions. Some of us are going to find ourselves playing the game as gods now. Gods who can now incarnate in human form. Does that happen before? Actually, yes. And that's where some of the problems of humanity have cropped up. Our past is littered with previous attempts at a chosen species on this planet that didn't work out so well when they became gods. And the experiment had to be started over. The resets, the previous great resets of the Gaia experiment that set us back to the Stone Age and having to learn again, maybe with less information about what came before, because it was the tree of knowledge that caused humanity's problems. And this is why the Bible gives that one way of viewing things as, oh gosh, the way to interpret the Garden of Eden story was they ate from the tree of knowledge and it ruined everything. And you've got a lot of people now saying, oh, well, we've just got to unknow all this stuff, get back to nature, get back to a simple tribal life of agriculture and tribalism, and everything will be perfect again. And that is one of the poles that is dragging our species down, trying to take it backward. Thinking that they're very noble and wonderful and they're going to save humanity by doing that. I'm sorry, it's not going to go down that way. If you keep pulling that in that direction, you're basically supporting the agenda of those who are pulling in the other direction that want to winnow humanity down to the few that control the power, which is kind of the follow-ons to the Da Vinci set. They think we're creating the technology, we have the money, we have the power, we control the vertical, we control the horizontal, we're going to be the gods, and you duds are gonna be our slaves. And this battle between sort of these naturists and this bunch is a key thing going on in humanity now. And they're actually, to a large extent, working together in this process of destroying our species. Not realizing it, both thinking that they're going to bring a better future. Because you've got one kind of working from the viewpoint of ninth dimensional view of this problem, saying, oh, we're on the verge of being gods, at least some of us. We've just got to get rid of all these ones that are, their spirituality is just too low level for us. I mean, they don't even understand the first thing of the mystical truths that we know from the Jewish occult and the Da Vinci Newtonian occult. And yes, Newton was a very interesting fellow. The folks of his generation were very much occultists, and many scientists secretly fall into musings about, can I use science to become a god? This is what's essentially behind the transhumanism effort, is to use technology to make a hybrid, a human that is godlike, that can self-repair, that can process faster than a normal human brain, that can leap tall buildings in a single bound, the bionic man kind of vision of the future. Well, that's kind of a ninth level consciousness thing. Low God level realization that as a God, if I had God-like consciousness, I could create more freely, have more creative power. Okay, well, this is a dangerous place to be. If most of the folks running your species are at this ninth level of consciousness, where they're realizing that my command of things through my DNA inheritance, through my great and wonderful brain, can control this world, can exert a level of control over the other members of my species, that gives me great power. Okay, there have been cats like this trying to climb up the ladder to godhood for a long time, and many of them have. That's how the system has evolved. And it's taken a while to get to where the most awake souls through this system have learned that no, it's not 9 levels we need, it's not 10, it's not 11, it's 12 dimensions that we need to make this all work. And physicists are still getting there. They haven't quite figured out. They're still, banging on 11 dimensions as the key to getting beyond our current understanding of physics. The key is 12. Actually, beyond that, there are many, many, many other dimensions. Each universe in the multiverse effectively gives you another dimension of reality to work with, because each universe is run by its own God, who can make their own rules. If they want to play within the rules of the multiverse, fine, or they can play within fantasy world rules. The universe of the god Tolkien is one. His great creation, what earned him a Messiah life, was creating this concept of Middle Earth, which so enraptured so many people and inspired so many souls to flights of fantasy. He has his own universe. It's the universe of Middle Earth, or at least as it's evolved since he ascended, since his life ended, and he got his own universe of creation. Who knows what it looks like now? Folks who are very attuned to Tolkien's wavelength may get to incarnate there and see if he ever succeeded in creating a Middle Earth that held together logically for a longer period of time than he could keep going with his mythology. If you look at the vast body of his work, you will see that the timeline of the trilogy works pretty well and sort of fits with The Hobbit. If you look at the broader range of his work, the Silmarillion, that never really got that much traction. It's not so popular as the other works because the stories are not as compelling. They don't present an overview of history that is compelling as our true history within the universe of truth, not the universe of fantasy. And this is the difference between gods of fantasy and gods of truth. The gods of truth build upon the save games of the creators, which are built upon the prime universe, which was the idea of the first creator, the soul that deserves to be called God, and which gave us this ability, this opportunity to be part of creating the system of reincarnation and karma that we enjoy now. It's a 12-dimensional system, which leads to many dimensions of many universes, which allow you to get out of this limitation if you want. Maybe you still want to go to Nirvana. Maybe you want to go to Tolkien land. Maybe you want to create your own Tolkien land. This is a possibility as your Merkaba forms. This Merkaba is a resonance. It's the prototype of your own universe. And when you can fully flesh out all 3 of the first 12 levels to an individuality that can sustain itself independently of other universes, that's the point at which you have your own creative universe. So you got to get all the way to level 12 before you really, levels 9 through 12, you're aware of your own universe, but you have limited control over whether you're playing in your own universe or another universe. Your actions, your experiments need to be proven in the prime universe before you earn the next level of godhood. And that's why gods still come and they participate in creation rather than hanging out in their own universe and playing mental masturbation games. They can do that, but they know they can't advance to the point where they have full control over this universe of theirs. And until they have full control over it, the virtual souls that are playing in that universe that they're able to experiment with are not fully under their control. Those virtual souls are able to follow the laws of the multiverse, which include karma, and will be beating on those gods with karma, giving them karmic consequences of the games they play in their universe, and getting them to the point where they must come play the game with everybody else again if they want to get any further, if they want to advance. And this is the frustration of being a god. It's not easy being a god. It's not something that every soul should aspire to. It's very difficult until you get to the highest level of godhood. This is the level that I call a senior creator, where your experience, your individual personality has developed to the point that you have earned your own private universe of creation. Now, some of those senior creators are real assholes. Borg is a real asshole. The soul that helped start the multiverse, start physical creation, who provided the volunteer for the anti-universe, and who has sort of been the adversary of God since day one, effectively, is a pretty dark person, dark soul. Nobody wants to play with that soul because Borg doesn't like to have anybody have any free will. Borg thinks that the best universe is one that I control the vertical, I control the horizontal, I have all virtual souls there that are programmed the way I want them to be programmed to react, and they are not allowed to advance. If they want to advance beyond level 0 consciousness, out of my universe. This is how Borg's universe works. And actually, Borg's universe is a pretty good one for training, because that's where the 0 level souls that just seem to be sitting there and never advancing go when they finally decide to make an advancement. They're challenged to go to Borg's universe and see what it's like having a bit of consciousness in a totally authoritarian world. And That's like being in hell, and hell's not fun. And this is the pressure that makes zero-level souls that are precocious enough to try to advance want to advance further. This is how creation works. It's always about pressure. This is why creation is essentially an extension of evolution. So the stuff that scientists are telling you about natural selection and evolution applies in the soul world as well. It is what keeps us playing the game of souls and not disconnecting into the Buddhist universe. Oh, I'm at nirvana. I'm going to sit here and meditate for the rest of eternity and in this perfect emptiness of soullessness. Okay? You'll find when you get there, even the most staunch Buddhist, that you get bored of nirvana after a while. It becomes a chore to maintain emptiness. For some, I mean, there's souls that yeah, maybe they're perfectly happy being there, and that emptiness becomes their raison d'être, and they never leave there. I don't know. I think most of them eventually find themselves being unhappy with their choice of universes, and they decide to reincarnate. They decide to end their existence, or their existence gets ended in that universe by the powers that run that universe. Buddha as a god may not be the Buddha that you've learned out of what was recorded of his teachings, or the other incarnations of Buddha, or the other incarnations of the Buddhist faith. Each of these has its own avatar, if you will, its own consciousness, its own spirit. Even if that particular consciousness, that idea, that religion doesn't have per se a god, it does. It's just that that god has chosen not to give itself a name, or to give it the name nirvana, or whatever your guru tells you is this enlightened state. That's why there's so many definitions of enlightenment, right? I'm telling you that there are 12 primary levels of spiritual advancement, and giving you the structure of it so you can relate it to the physical world that you're living in right now. You can relate it to, if you've had spiritual experience, you can relate it to where that spiritual experience fits with the physical world reality that you're dealing with. If you are one of those who has some sense that you've had a God level experience, or you are having a God level experience, you've got some spiritual powers that seem godlike that you're dealing with, maybe profiteering from, maybe using to get to the top of your field stealthily. This should help you deal with that, because once you start having God level powers, the game doesn't get easier. It's very hard to get from your first experience of God level to the highest level, because you've got to build up the whole of the God Merkaba, which includes all the dimensions of godhood. The first dimension of godhood is, I'm God. I have power. I can do things. And there's a temptation to think that you're the God, the only God, and you can do anything you want. And nothing could be further from the truth, because you're still subject to karma. And so gods will merrily go throwing thunderbolts around and manipulating the stock market to get rich, and etc., all the things that ninth level consciousnesses do. And will rack up a lot of karma, rack up a lot of enemies, and eventually nobody wants to play with them anymore. and they get banished to their universe, and playing with virtual souls that don't quite work the way that they want them to. They don't always do what they plan for them to do. And this is how budding gods get taught hard lessons of karma. And it's really hard at that level to learn. If you haven't developed a fully formed physical Merkaba, learned how to navigate within the limitations of the physical universe, you're going to have a hard time adapting to the freedom that you have in the spiritual world. And if you haven't really gotten good at understanding the spiritual world from many different viewpoints, you're not going to be very good at navigating godhood. So, if you're looking at somebody that, I'm sure you've seen these people that things come easy to. It's like anything they try, they can be successful at. And, they go have some great idea and they make multi-million dollars. You got a lot of teenagers and stuff like that becoming instant gods of the internet, doing something or other that happens to get popular on social media. And don't envy these people, because they're going to die. They're going to go through other challenges in their life that maybe will be a lot more challenging. If you become a multimillionaire before you've had your first serious relationship, it's going to be really hard to have a good perspective of how to form good relationships. If you start your first company, as a teenager or a 20-something, it's very hard to be a Mark Zuckerberg and find all this power and fame and notoriety thrust at you when you're still vulnerable to honeypotting by a foreign government. Don't envy these folks. They're going to be dealing with karma, either in this life or in the next, to the extent that they have used those powers tyrannically, naively, stupidly, allowing others to manipulate them and control them, supporting a tyranny. And certainly there's no greater tyranny that I know of in the world than the two biggest tyrannies I see in our current world. The tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party, state tyranny, and the tyranny of the World Economic Forum, corporate tyranny. Well, the third one that we're seeing crop up in many countries now of the tyranny of the mob. We're not having it anymore, and we're going to all rise up in revolt. That's a form of tyranny too, and it's a dangerous form of tyranny. If you've looked at revolutions in history, they don't usually end well. They end up with often a worse form of government than you had before. Look at the French Revolution. Great idea. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Wonderful ideals that the French Revolution started out with, and before you knew it, it was tyranny. Daily decisions about who was going to the guillotine next. What would be the most popular people to sacrifice and get cheering from the mob, which was usually yesterday's government. And out of that chaos, the people that still had any wherewithal in France said, we've got to get past this, and they picked a successful soldier and elevated him to, l'Empereur, Napoleon. How did that guy rise from a lowly Corsican colonel who happened to be successful in a siege as an artillery officer. Rise from that to become nearly the emperor of the world. If he'd had his way, if the Russian winters hadn't stifled his ambitions, if British General Wellington hadn't constantly been a thorn in his side. Well, also who's the hero of Trafalgar? Lord Horatio Nelson. Wellington and Nelson were the forces that stopped Napoleon. Who stopped Hitler? Who stopped Stalin? Who's going to stop Xi? Who's going to stop the World Economic Forum? Let's hope that it will be a coalition of folks that are going to do a better job of the post-war period than the Allies did in World War II, creating new tyrannies of the military-industrial complex and the pharma complex, wanting to sustain the great profits of the war era by creating more wars, creating more diseases, creating more problems that could easily be solved because we create them. We know what the solution is. That's where we've been to a large extent since World War II. We don't want to do that again. And that's why we need to be careful, especially careful who we let be gods right now. That's not that you shouldn't try to get through that, but these God wannabes, the Elon Musks of the world that seem to, everything they touch turns into gold. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then 5 steps forward. They seem to always go from success to success. Well, it's not always that way. If you talk to those folks in private, they do have setbacks. And the ones that are advancing learn from those setbacks. They don't keep making the same mistakes. And they stay humble. Humility is an important part of becoming a god worth being a god. If you advance to full godhood by being an asshole, and there are ones that have done that. I mentioned Borg. I would guess that the soul that incarnated as Hitler or Stalin, or even Xi, Mao, are advancing to a pretty high godhood in a very dark path. And that is something you can do. The dark gods become teachers. Their universes become the hells that teach us to appreciate heaven. You can do it that way. At any rate, let's see what we haven't covered in this topic. I think I've sort of given you a sense of how you can advance your own path spiritually, how you could live your own Messiah life, how you can recognize if you're in a Messiah life. Many people who are seeking spiritually are not finding a path. If you're kind of looking around, you think that there must be something more. Well, maybe you're on a Messiah life. Maybe you've just chosen a vacation life. And you can learn in a vacation life, but don't expect to have these patterns show you the way. Don't expect to have a life like the one I described in my life, where it seemed like there were just a lot of turning points, a lot of things that I had to cover, a lot of places I had to be, a lot of things I had to learn. And once I learn enough, it's like, okay, enough of that. And synchronicities hit me, and I've got to go off in another direction. Not everybody is in a Messiah life. That doesn't mean that you can't advance spiritually. It means that maybe you've got to focus on the more basic things, dealing with karma. You can have a Messiah life simply by having a successful relationship, simply by raising good kids and learning how to be a good parent, simply by being a good employee and learning how to navigate success in an organization that might be somewhat dystopian. If you have any artistic inclination at all, you can learn a lot by being an unsuccessful artist in your spare time and doing all the other things. And okay, I learned something from that. Maybe the next incarnation, I will get a chance at being a more successful artist. Maybe I will see that art isn't my forte. Maybe in the afterlife I'll realize, you know what? I didn't want to be a scientist. I didn't want to be an artist. What else can I do with my life? Maybe I can be an advisor, a consultant, somebody that helps other people that are struggling like I have. And that's actually the most common role for souls when they decide that they want to stay in the spiritual realm for a while. They stay there as advisors, as counselors. The folks that greet you when you end one incarnation and find yourself in heaven, having a life review and planning your next incarnation. And that's why there are many heavens. There are many kinds of consultants. Some specialize in Christian counseling. Some specialize in Muslim counseling. Some specialize in atheist counseling, etc., etc. Because there's no path of ideology, of religion, of belief that is not useful. If it's not useful, it will fall by the wayside. You know, there aren't many people going to the Olympian heaven these days. The Greek system of worship is not so popular. Maybe it'll come back. I don't think so. It will probably come back in a different form. And this is what I've essentially prophesied in my books, that we will get back to more of a pantheon view of divinity, where, you know, the top level gods are not gods of mountains, not gods of the sky or the sun or the earth. They're going to be gods that make sense for humanity in the next phase of our existence. Gods of commerce, of religion in general, gods that are whose ideas we got to bring all these religions together effectively. I think that's kind of what I'm doing with what I'm teaching you is how to mesh religions, not into, you know, a dumbed down version of that, you know, okay, well, we're going to take only what's common to every religion and that becomes religion. This is kind of the idea behind this cosmic oneness cult that folks are trying to cobble together. This is dumb. This is not progress. This is communism, spiritual communism. You don't try to force every peg, every round peg into a square hole, or every star-shaped peg into a round hole. That's not progress. That's regressive. Omnism is about allowing everybody to have their own hole, but helping them to realize that that is what is healthy. And that doesn't mean that everybody's truth is the absolute truth. It means that different truths are valuable for people at different levels of their spiritual path. The Christian truth may be just right for some people. The Muslim truth may be just right for some people. And to the extent that they don't force it on others, to the extent that they don't become militant in their pursuit of their religion, that's okay. If they are militant, if they are getting in the way, of course we have to. That's a form of tyranny, right? Imposing your religion on others is tyranny. And my teaching is that tyranny is the cardinal karmic sin. In fact, you could pretty much say it's the only sin, pushing something on somebody else that they don't want when you don't need to. Now, a community has to have laws. You have to make boundaries that everybody agrees they need to live by, and that's why we need things like constitutions. That's why we need things like a legislative branch, an executive branch, a judicial branch of government. These are good ideas of separation of powers, because if all power resides in any one set of hands or any one party or anything, that's tyranny, isn't it? At any rate, I think I've given you a good sense of where you might belong, where you might look, where you might search for meaning in your life. If nothing else, you can do well in life by opposing tyranny, by exposing tyranny, not necessarily fighting it, which is kind of creating your own tyranny. This is why peaceful protest is always the way to go. Gradual change is better than abrupt change. I would much rather have another constitutional convention than a revolution. Now look at what the two sides, two parties, if you will, are gyrating around in the United States. You've got the Democrats, who are harboring an element that are actively fomenting revolution, rebellion. They're encouraging groups that are anarchists, that are Marxist anarchist ideologues that are trying to separate us by race, by sex, by sexual preference, by everything that they can think of to make people militant, to cause trouble, to destroy communities. On the other hand, for the most part on the Republican side, you have people that say, hey, the Constitution worked pretty good. It's just that so many people aren't obeying it. There's like a two-tiered system where I have to obey all the laws, but the Hunter Bidens of the world can get away with murder or near to it. And that's not fair. We need to amend this. We need to start obeying our own laws and holding our leaders up to the same standard as the people. And we need to respect individual freedoms. I have the freedom to speak my mind. And I don't like my kids being taught that they can be anything they want. They can have any identity they want. They can be Pokemon people, and we have to call them by their Pokemon names. Nobody has to accept that. You can ask them to. You can ask them to say, well, I want to be referred to as Pikachu from now on. And I would appreciate if you would use my Pikachu name. Okay, you can ask people to do that, but you can't demand it. This is tyranny. This is demanding people use the speech you dictate to them. Tyranny. Do you understand the difference, folks? Now, similarly, you can't demand that people accept your ideal of the old way of things, okay? You can't demand that they allow themselves to be referred to as he or she. They have a right to say, no, I would prefer if you called me it or shit. I don't know. So they can say that too. They're free to ask for that. They're free to organize for that. And if they want to legislate that, the shit of the world gets to stand up, fine. Go for it. If you can pass it into law, if you can get around the fact that if you force people to speak that way, you're committing tyranny, which is unconstitutional, against free speech. Well, you see, here's the problem. Okay? This is why we need a constitution, why the Constitution needs to have a very, very fundamental right to free speech. Now, harmful speech is an area. It's, the boy who cried wolf, the Chicken Little problem. If you participate in speech that is causing a disruption, causing a problem, causing people to shut down their businesses for no reason, that's dangerous speech, isn't it? Locking down entire countries, an entire world, based upon bad science, oh, that's dangerous speech, isn't it? And the folks that did that should have some consequences. They should come under scrutiny. They should get reviewed by a legal tribunal who looks at what they did with their speech, how they used their power, and evaluate whether they used it tyrannically for their own benefit, for the profit of corporations that were throwing money into their back pockets. But it should be done constitutionally. This is why when somebody says, I'm going to go to Fauci's house and lynch him, let's all go there and string him up by his whatever, these are tyrants too. They are not allowing due process of law. This is why we need law. This is why we need the rule of law. Because you know what happens if you don't have that? You have a country like communist China, where the great leader can decide one day, Jack Ma is getting too powerful. He's got too much money. He's got too many businesses. People think he's too wonderful a guy. People think he's better than me. I better knock him down a few notches. And they go seize his companies from him. They take a new board of directors from the Communist Party and say, this is now the people that run your company, Jack Ma. We did that for your own good. This is tyranny. Democracy, in its purest form, is tyrannical. If you let the mob rule, if you just say, get everybody in a room and you shout at them, do you want this? Do you want to, you think the government should give you all money? Yay, 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 we want money. Okay, this is anarchy. This is tyranny of the people. That's not going to work, you stupid idiots. That's not going to work. It is going to destroy humanity faster than the Great Reset program of the World Economic Forum. We got to meet somewhere in the middle, not throw out the baby with the bathwater. And from what I can see, pretty much every point of view looking around this species of ours, people are doing that. They're polarizing and wanting to kill their enemies and rebuild humanity in their own image. Let's not do that again, okay? We've done that before. The chosen species of creation has destroyed itself or been destroyed by other God-level species many times while God was waking up, hoping that you guys would get your act together and finally figure out how to make karma work. How to make the multiverse work the way that it was intended. That's how divine plans work. Great ideas need to be implemented. How do they get implemented? They don't get implemented by top down. God didn't create everything. God had a good idea and let all you guys work out the idea, work out the kinks, argue, conflict about it. This is the whole reason behind this world that we see around us. The physical universe is our chance to participate in making the laws that we all obey. the laws of the multiverse, the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of reincarnation and karma are all part of this system that works, that's working better and better and better, despite the best efforts of some of you morons that keep trying stupid ideas, like communism, like pure democracy. Doesn't work. It's been tried. Don't go backward. We cannot go back to a tribalist existence, an isolated tribalist existence. Even if the internet died tomorrow, even if all our technology died tomorrow, we would never, ever go back to a tribal existence without us regressing. How many years? 20,000 years? Do we want to go back and do that again? No. We do not live in a cyclical creation. This is bullshit. This is stupid Hindu bullshit. We don't go through the yugas again and again and again and again. Dumb. Progress is moving forward. Evolution is moving forward. Creation moves forward. It may not seem like it at times. It may seem like we're taking a few steps back. But in every case, in every event of great destruction, the end of the dinosaurs, the end of the Younger Dryas, the end of the last ice age, every one of these extinction events was a learning experience. A learning experience through which better God-level species were created. Yes, and there were other God-level species. The first God-level species was not organic. It was not a DNA-based thing. It was basically an android. A collection of materials put together, just like we put together silicon chips today. We put together robots and androids. Those were the first smart beings that explored the universe. And they did things the hard way. Then they figured out how to invent DNA. And terraforming became much easier. All you had to do was send some spores to a likely planet and wait some period of time, and then you could go send colonists. And, once DNA-based intelligence arose, it was a lot more fun than this previous kind of android intelligence. It didn't live forever, but it had a lot more interesting existence than the ones that did live forever, and developed in ways that these ones that live forever couldn't, because they weren't designed to do that. This is how creation is developed from thought. The first thought was to build robots that we could put our conscience in and go run around and play Transformer games. Turned out it was a lot more fun to be able to experience emotion, to experience hunger and fullness, the joy of eating a steak or having ice cream, having sex with somebody you love, seeing a child grow up. That's where all the fun is at now. That's why this is the chosen species. Even though many of the other God-level species are out there and are still competing with us with almost no knowledge of their creator. Been that long since this whole game started that a lot of those aliens that think they are better than humanity and need to come and save us from ourselves, well, they're not as smart as they think they are. They're not as great creators as they would imagine themselves to be. Many of them don't know how they were created, don't realize that they resulted from work that started right on there on this planet. Yep, this has always been the center of creation. This has always been God's special planet that he conducted his own special experiments in, taking the best technologies, the best ideas from all over the multiverse and integrating them into new versions. At some point, the other gods realized that God was doing this here, and that's when the destruction started happening. That's when folks started throwing planets here, giving us space weather, trying to destroy what had been built here. That was all part of the plan. This is how the process of getting this great social experiment going was a process of forgetting that there was even an experiment running. With each reset, the remaining God-level souls knew less and less about how it was all set up, had less and less appreciation for what was going on in this strange little planet on the edge of the Milky Way. And that was the only thing that got to the point where they would not interfere for long enough for what needed to happen. And what needed to happen was creating a God-level species that was totally amnesiac and letting them wake up and discover for themselves the truth. That's what humanity has been doing since the last near extinction event about 12,000 years ago. And yeah, it's been frustrating, it's been painful, it's been hard, but it was the only way that all this could happen. It was the only way that we could perfect karma, that we could do it in a way that would attract other souls to watch this drama going on this planet. And that's where we're at right now. Most of the multiverse has realized what's going on here and is watching every move we make. Enthralled, wondering when it's going to be to the point that I want to jump in this. They get so wrapped up in the games going on here. This is why there's so many newbies coming to humanity. It's the in species right now. Everybody wants to be a part of this event, wants to see how it's going to come out, wants the opportunity to get into the cool universes. The coolest universe, of course, is the prime universe, where you're getting to work directly on creation. You're getting to work on approved experiments, not just head in the clouds, fantasy land. Well, there's some people that like that too. There's people that there's ones that, saw The Lord of the Rings and want to go to the Tolkien universe. And they know to get there that they've got to pass the Tolkien bar. I don't know what it takes to get into that universe, but it probably requires a lot of experience with that genre and with the human species that's behind it. So probably there's ones wanting to be human so they can go to the Tolkien universe. And more power to them. They came here, they incarnated, they bring their spiritual energies to our species, and that's what it took to get us over this critical energy that it took to cement the latest laws of reincarnation and karma into the pattern of the multiverse. Otherwise, if it was just operating in this little test tube of Earth, and we needed to get it to a critical mass, a critical energy, a critical spiritual energy, that this pattern could not just dissolve. That's where we're at today. That's what this event is all about. We're to that critical mass. And all we've got to do is see who survives this event in the different universes, the parallel universes that share our reality, or at least most of it. Sort them out. Is who's going to stay here, who's going to go there, who's going to go there. This is what we're doing, is sorting souls right now. The decisions you make as a human right now are, you really should be making for yourself. But making consciously, because if you're within this system here, you're within this reality of pressure. And as we know, this pressure is a pressure of, it's an existential pressure. Everybody knows that the whole species might end for any number of reasons. There could be another cataclysmic asteroid hit. There could be a cataclysmic volcanic or seismic event. We could blow ourselves up with nuclear weapons. We could wipe our whole species out with another bug. We could create a robotic species that wipes out all of humanity. Those are all things that will and can happen in different universes. And you can contribute to in any way you want. The only one that really makes any difference, as far as I can tell you, is whether you're supporting the more tyrannical views of the future versus the freedom-oriented views. And even there, I can't tell you which way to go. You may be happy in a tyrannical, top-down run Borg universe. It may be just your cup of tea, so go ahead and keep pulling that banner forward. I represent very strongly the other team that says that I want to be part of this creation thing that God started. I want to be free to create as I like to create. I want to be free to create a fantasy, if that's my desire, like a Tolkien. I want to be free to create reality, create scientifically, create something that could be lasting. It could be a permanent rule of the multiverse. Maybe create a rule as important as the speed of light, or create some additions to the speed of light that give us new ways of circumventing it, besides wormholes. You see where this is going? This is the quantum mechanics of the soul. Scientists are studying things that might be additions to the rules, that might be rules that we never found yet. This is how all of these rules developed. Scientific-minded people started observing the creations of thought and winnowing out the ones that actually worked. This is how spiritual scientists created the multiverse. Now, other senior creators were more artistic, more abstract thinkers, and they created the worlds of art, the universes of art, which are useful in and of itself because they provide inspiration for the scientists. How many scientific ideas were inspired by science fiction? Even ideas of consciousness have been inspired by fictional works. It all contributes. And it's a matter of finding out where you fit in it. And it takes a long time to fit in it. As I told you in the last 3 long slogging sessions, I learned that I've taken literally thousands and thousands and thousands of incarnations to get there, which included incarnations that, were long before soul vehicles reached the level of sophistication of the human soul vessel. I've had to go through a lot more than most of you have to deal with. And if I can get through all that and become the relatively well-rounded person, sane person that's talking to you, I don't know, maybe you think I'm insane, I don't know. But I think I'm pretty sane. More sane than most of the people I see around me, operating off of different set of fundamental assumptions. the most fundamental of which is this idea that there's one all-powerful, almighty force, whether you call it God or source or Christ consciousness, universal consciousness. This is bullshit. You got to get off that. We're all individuals. We're all on our own path. We're all contributing to a greater whole, to some extent or another, but that greater whole is a multiverse. And that multiverse includes truths that drive creation, that drive new laws of the multiverse, and it includes fantasy universes, which are alternate realities that don't have to obey the laws. But as long as you're playing in this universe, you have limitations. You have laws that you can't transcend. You gotta eat, or you're gonna die. Well, I don't know, maybe there's some breatharians here that can actually not eat anything, not get hungry, and not die. I'm getting hungry right now, so I'm sorry, it doesn't work for me. Maybe it works for you. More power to you. At any rate, I think I've rambled on enough for this one. I hope that was useful to you. This is Rob Trump with the Honest Hour. Like, share, subscribe, and let's talk about it. Tell me where I got something wrong. I'd love to hear somebody give me some new information, because I listen and I search and I look for new voices all the time. This is my nature. I've always been this way. I've always been wanting to learn more and get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm not learning anymore from this. I got to go find some new passion. And I'm not finding very much these days that's really turning my crank, other than current events of keeping up with where we are in this unfolding event in this universe, which is going to be a surprise to me too, to some extent. I don't know. I've never wanted to know the day of my death. I've never wanted to know the exact future. I like speculation. I like fantasy. I like thinking about fantasy that might be true. Science fiction is what they call that. That's essentially what you're dealing with prophecy. All prophets have been basically science fiction writers, science fiction thinkers. Not every bit of prophecy comes true in the prime universe, but it can come true, and it has a certain reality in some other universe that's forming. It may be very ephemeral. The universe of Susie thinking that she's going to be prom queen and head cheerleader may be as ephemeral as 1 year of dreaming of a young girl that is not going to get her dream. But that's built a certain piece of her Merkaba that will affect the rest of that life and future lives. Maybe that dream becomes so solidified that each incarnation is moving towards this, I've got to be born as the perfect woman. Okay, that's a dream. That's a goal that can lead to a Messiah life. What's your idea of a perfect woman? Or maybe it leads to a disenchantment with womanhood and a series of incarnations trying out the other sex and seeing if being male is any better. Or trying a species that doesn't have sex. If sex is your thing, you may get wrapped up in that kind of ideal and create an art or create a truth, a scientific truth around sexuality in some species, or existing or new. This is how new soul vehicles get created. This is how sex got created. It didn't exist from the beginning. Actually, I was listening to something today. He claimed that sex went back to eukaryotes. Well, this may be true, but this is not really understanding what sex is. simply exchanging DNA sexually is not sex. Just doing that did not create sexes. And this is something that I didn't comment at the time, but I probably should have. If you listen to my talks about sex, the real magic came when two different species were able to do this thing. Not just one species exchanging DNA, but two totally independent species finding a way to have sex. This is the truth about cats and dogs, which I talk about. I think I've already talked about. If I haven't, ask me to do a special session on the truth about cats and dogs. Anyway, for the Honest Hours, Rob Trump, like, share, subscribe. I'll see you next time. Thanks.